bring the block under our sacrum. So with the feet still on the mat, we're in a supported bridge, feet down. Feel that sacrum right on the block. Hands can start at the front of the pelvis. It's going to be very important that we keep our sacrum touching the block as we start to alternate picking up 1 foot at a time. Now you can have fingers here in the hip creases, checking for any pinching. We don't want to feel that our fingers are getting pinched when we do this movement. If we are, it could be that we're tipping the pelvis forward. So if you want to add on, you can add a little bit of resistance. Either hand to the thigh, and we'll just try to push it away, but not let it move. And that is a nice way that we can activate the hip flexor. Keep that sacrum down. One more. Okay, we're lifting off the block, lowering down slowly. And now we'll put the block between the knees or the thighs. You can still keep the feet down, or you can have the feet up, knees over the hips, but make sure that that sacrum stays down and we don't arch the back. So hands behind the head, elbows up. Take a big breath in, breathing into the ribs. And as you exhale, gently hug the block, lift off the shoulder blades. Feel your 2 pelvic points tighten in. Inhale to lower down. Exhale, gently hug the block. Any amount, lift off the shoulder blades. Feel those ribs knit in like you're tightening a corset around the lower ribs. Inhale to lower. Now let's add a little more hip flexor engagement. Exhale, hug the block, lift off the shoulder blades. Chin is slightly toward the throat. Take your left hand to the block. You're going to try to push the block out of your legs, but to resist it, you're going to pull the thigh bones back toward the body. Hand back behind the head. Inhale and lower. I'll show it with the feet down. Exhale, lift up. Same thing. Hug the block. Now right hand's going to try to push the block out between the legs, but you're going to pull back with the thighs. So you should feel those inner thighs light up a little bit. Hand behind the head. Inhale and lower. Exhale, lift. Back of the neck is long. Hug the block. Hand tries to push the block out, but instead we almost feel the thighs pulling in toward the body. Bring it back behind the head. Inhale and lower. Exhale, lift, gently hugging the block. Right hand tries to push the block away, but we pull the thigh bones back toward the body, engaging the hip flexors, hand behind the head. Let's inhale and lower. We're going to come all the way into quadruped. And we don't need the block, but if you want to have it on the sacrum, you can. So we'll do shoulders over the wrist, hips over the knees. Feel the front of the throat lift up, those pelvic points draw in. We're going to slide our left toes back first, and then pause here, making sure we didn't change anything in that left hip. So we didn't dip the belly or the low back. Really zipper up and then float the left toes off the ground. So the action of hip flexion is pulling the thigh toward the torso. We're going to go super slow. So we're going to pull it in maybe for 3, 2, 1, and then see if you can hold there. Now slowly extend that right leg or left leg back. We pull it in for 3, 2, 1, using that psoas to flex the hip. We hold, and then we extend it back. So we'll try that a couple more times. Nice and slow, pulling it in. You can do your own little 3 count as slow as you need. Hold it for a moment, and then extend it back out. Let's try one more. Pull it in nice and slow, not letting the back do the moving, just moving from that hip flexor. Let's switch sides. Realign that triple S. Right toe slide back. Lift the belly up. Float the right toes. Super slow. Pull that right thigh bone toward the chest or the belly for 3, 2, 1 without rounding the back. Hold and then extend it back out. Pull that right thigh bone forward for 3, 2, 1. Hold that hip flexion and then extend it back out. So we're going to go nice and slow. It does not matter how far the leg comes forward into flexion. Let's really try to make sure we're not using the back to do this movement. So not rounding the back, not tucking the tailbone under, but holding that neutral pelvis, neutral spine. Lower it down. We're putting the block between our legs. So the block will come between knees or thighs, whatever width or however high you want, and we'll head to down dog with the block between the thighs. So just like we did, we're going to tuck the toes, Hover and lift, lift, lift the block up toward the hip creases, getting that hip flexion here. So really feel the thigh bones try to lift up into the pelvis like elevator shafts lifting up. Keep that connection of thigh to torso as we walk the hands back toward the feet for our happy squat, keeping the block here. So you've got that extra engagement in the inner thighs. We'll push the ground away and rise up. We can take the block out now. And we'll just put it aside. We're gonna walk forward with our hip flexion march, just like we did on our back. So hold that sacrum still, pick up the right foot. Maybe we bring hand to the thigh, add that little resistance, just like we did on our back, and then step it forward. So we pick up the other foot, not moving from the back at all, just moving from the hip. So anytime the thigh comes toward the torso, that's hip flexion. We're using the psoas. And when you get to the front of the mat, we will pause there and continue with our sun sal. So arms come up, reach those shoulder blades up, hinge at your hips, planting the feet down, right foot steps back, lower the knee and the top of the foot. Let's lift up for our 90-90. Ears over the shoulders, over the ribs, over the pelvis. One hand to the front of the pelvis, one hand to the back. Let's just compact those hands together. Make sure we're not tipping forward. Feel your right thigh bone try to lift up into the pelvis. Hands come down, we'll cat-cow. And head to down dog. Tuck the toes, feel those thigh bones lift up into the pelvis. Lift the hip creases. Take a breath in. On your exhale, lower the knees, quadruped. Right foot steps forward. We untuck the left toes. We're in our 90-90, other side. Check that feeling of a broom behind your back. Hands front and back of the pelvis. Feel your left thigh bone try to lift up, up, up. Stretching that left hip flexor. Hands come down. Left foot steps forward to meet the right. Bent knee forward fold. Push the ground away. Let's rise up. Shoulder blades lift. We're hinging forward, our left foot steps back, land your left knee onto the block, so left toes stay tucked. Zipper that pubic bone up, so we're stretching that psoas here, and we'll get deeper by reaching that left arm up. Feel your left fingertips reach up, up, up. Keep the ribs in. If we pop the ribs, we're gonna lose that activation here. So really zipper up. Feel a little bit of side bend here for a deeper pull on that psoas, if it feels good. Lift up, hands come down. Quadruped, cat-cow. Tuck the toes, lift those thigh bones straight up toward the pelvis. Hips are flexed here in down dog, bellies toward the thighs without changing the spine or the pelvis. On your next exhale, lower the knees. Left foot steps forward, our right knee lands on the block. Lift up, feel that right knee try to lift off the block, right thigh bone lift up. Right arm forward and up, lift, lift, lift. Maybe we bring hands to the ribs, side bend here, or just lift straight up. So it should feel like a nice stretch or pull for that right psoas. Lift back up, hands come forward or to your block. Right foot steps forward to meet the left, bent knee forward folds. Reach those arms up. Starting our sequence, we'll hinge at the hips. Keep that spine long. Right foot back, lower the knee, not the toes. Let's lift up. Feel triple S here, or anywhere you want. We're gonna work on our hinges, so bringing our torso toward this left thigh. You could also have your block here, and we'll hinge forward, and then lift back up. So we don't need the block. You could just have hands. This is the action of flexing or hinging at the left hip. So we're bringing the torso or the belly toward this left thigh, but we're keeping the spine really long. Keep pushing into that left foot. We're lifting off our right knee for side lunges. If you want to put your hands down as you lift that right knee, you can. We're going to continue turning to the right. Side lunges. Feel free to place your fingers into your hip creases, just like we did on our backs, to make sure we're not pinching our hip creases here. So again, if you're feeling that pinch of the fingers in the hip creases, the pelvis could be tipping forward. So really feel the pubic bone try to zipper up in line with the belly button. Turn back to the front of the mat. Three-legged quadruped, right knee slides in, left leg back. You can put the block on the sacrum again. Let's slowly flex the left hip. Pull it in nice and slow. Extend it back out without any movement through the low back. Pull it in, slowly flex that left hip. Extend it back out a couple more times. Pull that left thigh in slowly. Extend it back out. Lower for quadruped, both knees down. Block comes between the knees or the thighs again, as high as it feels comfortable to have it. This is going to help us engage the psoas here as we tuck the toes. Exhale, lift the block up, down dog. Take a breath in. Gently hug the block as you lower the knees back to quadruped. Inhale. Exhale, hug the block. Feel that block lift up into the hip creases, helping you flex the hips in down dog. On your next exhale, you're going to lower down. Let's try that one more time. Inhale at the bottom. Exhale, hug the block, lift it up toward the bottom of the pelvis, down dog. Hands walk back, happy squat. Big bend in your knees, let's rise up. Take the block out. We're going to walk it forward with that same march. Pick up the left foot, maybe hand to the thigh. We add that resistance, we try to push it away. Pick up the right foot. Maybe we add that resistance. Walking our way forward for the second side. Okay, when you get there, reach the arms forward and up. Big bend in your knees. We're flexing the hips here. Hinge, torso to the thighs. Left foot back. Lower the knee, but not the toes. We're in our low lunge. Feel that triple S wherever you want to have the hands, and we'll hinge. Bringing the torso toward that right thigh. Lifting back up. So we're working this hip hinge or hip flexion on the right side now. Long through the spine. We're heading into those side lunges. We're going to turn to the left side of the mat, lifting off that left knee. Turn left, maybe fingers in those hip creases. If you want to use a block, sometimes it's kind of nice to just have it at the bottom of the ribs, between the ribs and the pelvis. And that can be helpful if you tend to tip a lot in the pelvis, to really feel this flexion of the hips, moving back into the hip creases. Turn it back to the front of the mat. Three-legged quadruped, left knee will stay down, right leg extends back. Now really hold this left thigh bone still as we flex the right hip, pull it in slowly, extend it out slowly. Pulling it in slowly without rounding the back, and then extending it out without dropping the belly. So any pace, hold that feeling of your left thigh bone very still. Lower to quadruped, block between the thighs, as high as it feels comfortable for that extra engagement as we transition back and forth from quadruped to down dog. So of course we can move with the breath, exhaling when we move for that extra core engagement, and really try to keep the hips in this flexed position where our thigh is toward the torso without rounding. When we get to down dog, walk it back, happy squat. Press down into the feet as you rise up, take the block out, and again, we will walk it forward. Pick up the right foot, flexing the hip, using that psoas, resist, and then step it forward. Any pace, holding that pelvis still, trying to stay still through the low back. Okay, when you make your way forward, we're going to stream that together and just add a little bit more to it. So knees stay soft. Arms reach forward and up, shoulder blades lift, hinge at the hips, flexing at the hips, right foot steps back. We're gonna lower that right knee to the block again. 90-90 here, hands wherever you want. Now let's really feel this flexion of the left thigh. We're gonna bring the torso toward the thigh and then push the ground away to come back up. So every time we hinge, we're moving from this left hip crease. Belly's coming toward the thigh, but staying lifted. We're going to turn to the right, lift off the block, side lunges. Again, you can have hands in the hip creases. You can use the block for feedback to make sure we're not pinching at the hip crease. Really plant down through the feet. We're turning to the back of the mat, high lunge. So as we turn to the back, we're in a high lunge. Our right foot is in front, left foot is in back. Zipper that pubic bone up. We'll pendulum swing. Push into that right foot. Swing the left thigh. and then tap it back into your lunge. So even though the left leg is the moving leg, we're working on the right side, we're working on the stability of that right hip, and the left hip is just flexing. It's just a little swing of that psoas. When it comes forward, that's flexion, and when it comes backwards, that's extension. Push down into the right foot. Three-legged quadruped, lower to hands and knees. Right leg back. Lift the belly, zipper up. We're gonna bend the right knee. Now, bigger range of motion for the psoas. Let's pull it forward, hip flexion, hold it, and then keep it bent as we extend it, little glute pulse. Pull it forward, flexion, and then we do a little hip extension, glute pulse. So it's just a bigger range of motion. We're getting some more muscles involved too, like the glutes and the hamstrings. But our focus today is that psoas. So we pull it forward, we're flexing the hip, we pull it back, we're extending. So the psoas is getting a little stretch on the way back. Lower the knees. You can have your block there if you'd like between the thighs. Let's do that quadruped to down dog. Use the block there to give you that feedback for hip flexion, belly to the thighs, and then lower with control. Back to quadruped, move with the breath, exhale as you move. Any pace. When you get to down dog, walk your hands back toward the feet for happy squat. We're gonna take the block out, but stay in your happy squat. We've got a cross ankle forward fold. We're gonna turn to the left into a cross ankle forward fold. I like to have my hands on the block here with my knees very bent. Spine is long. Now stay here, lift the ribs up, or standing split. Load that left foot, right leg comes behind, keep it low. Now if this is plenty to focus on the left hip flexing, do that. If you also want to bend the right knee and pull that right thigh forward, flex and extend, you can. So we're holding that hip flexion on the left side, that standing leg. So that psoas is holding that position, and then our right psoas is getting that little swing forward and back. All right, let's bring the feet down. Push into the feet, rise up, second side. Exhale, hinge. Left foot steps back, we're gonna lower the knee onto the block. Lift up into our 90-90. Feel that triple S. Ears over the shoulders, over the ribs, over the pelvis. Zipper up. Hands anywhere as we hinge. And then lift back up. So we're flexing the right hip this time. Our torso is going to come toward that right thigh without pinching at that hip. Hold the pelvis still. Picture that broom behind you. We're going to lift off that left knee. Turn to the left. Any side lunges. Use your hands wherever it's helpful. Check in with your breath. Make sure you're not rounding the back or sticking the tailbone out. Turn to the back of the mat. So we're going to be in our high lunge. Left foot is in front, right leg is behind. Push into that left foot as we pendulum swing the right leg and land softly. So we're trying to land softly on this right ball of the foot. Push down into that left big toe. So again, this right side is moving. That hip flexor or psoas is going to swing and pull forward into hip flexion and then hip extension as it comes behind us. Three-legged quadruped, we're going to plant the hands down, lower onto the knees, left leg comes behind us. Three-legged quadruped, zipper up, pull it forward. Now hold the knee bend as we extend the hip, maybe a little glute pulse, pulse that heel up toward the ceiling, and then pull it in, pull it forward, hip flexion, bring it back, hip extension. Any pace. This could be such a small movement. Let's make sure that we're not tipping the pelvis and getting the movement from the back, but instead just pulling forward from the front of the hip, working that psoas. Lower the knees, block between the thighs up as high as you can toward the pelvis, and really feel the block try to lift up toward the bottom of the pelvis. Tuck the toes, lift up, down dog. Every time you exhale, you're gonna move either to down dog or back to quadruped. Keep the block lifting up toward the pelvis, engaging the inner thighs, engaging the hip flexors more. When you get to down dog, keep the belly toward the thighs. So that's that hip flexed position. Hands walk back toward the feet, happy squat. Push down into the ground. You can move the block. Now we're gonna cross ankle forward fold, do a little pivot to the right. Now our right foot is crossed in front. Both knees very bent, lift the ribs, lift the belly. Stay here or extend the left leg back, bent knee standing split. So our next option is just to stay, work on this lift up of the right thigh bone or bend that left knee, same thing we did in quadruped. Pull or swing it forward. Psoas flexes the hip and then extends. Good, let's lower to a quadruped, hands and knees. You can cat-cow, you can belly roll. Let's take an adductor stretch, step that left foot out to the left. Stay here or add some rocks. Do whatever feels good for this left inner thigh. Let's switch sides. Step that right foot out to the right. Long through the spine. Whatever feels good for this right inner thigh. Check in with your breath. Good, come back in. We're gonna come onto our backs and we will have the option to use the block, but you don't have to. So I'm gonna have the block under my sacrum, just like when we started. Feel that sacrum, which is right above the tailbone. On the block, maybe hands at the front of the pelvis. Pick up your left foot, so that's hip flexion. We've been here a bunch of times today, but this time we're gonna passively come into it. So wherever you can grab behind the leg or in front of the leg, you can start to pull that thigh in. Just make sure it doesn't feel like an uncomfortable pinchiness at the front of the hip. If it does, don't pull it in quite as far, don't flex it so much. And then we'll try to extend this right leg out straight or straight-ish, as long as that feels comfortable. So left side is flexed, right hip is in a little bit of extension. So you might even be getting a small stretch or pull at the front of that right psoas or hip flexor. Breathe into the ribs. Both knees will bend and we'll release the feet down. Recheck that your sacrum is on the block and then pick up the right foot. Grab wherever it feels good. Maybe we start to lengthen this left leg out, but keep this feeling of almost pulling the belly down toward the block so that we don't arch the low back. We want to stay really long here and just feel that the movement is coming from the hips. Let's release it down. You can stay on the block if you're on it. Maybe hands to the pelvis, and let's just do a little mobilization here. Let the knees drop out a little bit, and then the knees roll in. Little bit of gentle mobility in the hips. Just a little ease and freedom around those hip flexors. And when you're ready, you can lift off the block if you're still on it. Figure four, pick up that right foot, cross it over. Recheck that triple S, so we're long in both sides of the waist. Take whatever option feels good for the arms, for the upper body. Make it as deep or as gentle as you'd like. Switch sides when you're ready. We'll pick up the other foot, cross it over. Align that triple S. Allow yourself to do whatever feels good for this left hip, even if it's something different than you did on the other side. make any extra movements or stretches that might feel good. You can hug the knees in and rock side to side. Anything you want. And whenever you're ready, you can end lying down, you can end in a seated position. Take a few moments to get settled. Relaxing the forehead. Relaxing the jaw. As you inhale, try to bring in as much air as you can, really filling the lungs. And with each exhale, can you notice any tension or gripping or tightness you might be holding on to?